Hey, welcome to today's broadcast from the Section 2 Sports Studio. By way of introduction, my name is Sean Martin. I've been a freelance sports writer with the Albany Times Union since 2007. Regularly cover a wide variety of high school sports, in addition to D1 college hockey, RPI, and Union. Got a few books out on the streets: Dear Liam and Noah, Letters from Daddy, The Three Bulls, both on Amazon. The goal of this podcast, this is episode 3, is to highlight the best in Section 2 sports here in the 518, featuring teams and student athletes from around the area that deliver the best stories week in and week out and give more of a spotlight to them that can be done in the 600-word newspaper articles that I'm extremely fortunate enough to be able to author up. Again, episode 3, it's going to be a big one because we are welcoming Big Game James, Mr. James Allen, who has covered Section 2 sports since 1989. It also doubles as a broadcaster for Spectrum here in the 518. With that, and his Pittsburgh Pirates cap, James, how you doing, buddy?
Good, Sean. I originally had a San Francisco 49ers hat on, but I didn't want to alienate you, so I switched to the Pittsburgh Pirate hat, only because I'm a Roberto Clemente fan, not a Pittsburgh Pirate fan.
Clemente's a good person to be a fan of. How's everything going? You're winding down. I know you got all-star teams to get cranked up and all that, but summer's kind of your time to catch your breath, right? After a busy,
I just finished my last All-Star team, Sean. So pretty much done writing a couple other stories on some different things, but basically, winding down, get a little respite before we get cranked up with the middle of August and high school football camps and then fall sports.
That's awesome. Thanks for coming in today. I wanted to kind of just put a bow on the 25-26 season. A lot of great stuff in Section 2 this year. You know, I have a few memories that I'll share as we go along, but if you can think back to September when it all kicked off in the fall before the winter and spring sports, what are some of your top memories that you have right now that you can take with you for this season?
Well, thinking back to fall, Sean, I think a lot of people will point to football and Saratoga Springs ending CBA's 4-year run at the AA championship, 14-13 in a driving rainstorm at Colony, which was, obviously the preface to them, getting on to the state final. They didn't wind up losing to the same team that CBA lost to, which was CBA of Syracuse. But it was a great opportunity for another team to break through. And obviously it was a big thing for Saratoga Springs. They hadn't been to that level in 10 years. And obviously it was a big upset. CBA had won. They had beaten them in the regular season. They were undefeated in terms of the Section 2 portion of their schedule. And they were going for 5 straight. So that was a big one. Shen girls cross country winning the Class A championship, state championship was really big. And Lyra Bushy, Layla Bushy going to Notre Dame. Great story. She won the state championship and ran in the Nike race out on the West Coast, and a real good strong for them. And then if you think about on the boys' side of cross country, Burn Hills, 7 out of 8 times they've won the state championship. Chip Button's really got it going there right now.
Yeah, they really do. And, it's funny you brought up all those, because when I think of the memories for me, like I covered the Saratoga game at Shaker at the end of September. And Ben Corrier had over 300 yards rushing that night.
Right.
I remember interviewing Eric Hayden, Saratoga coach, afterwards. He was somewhat emotional about the win. It was a 28-21 win, but I think for him it was really starting to come together. And I think that win showed him how good they could be potentially. And they had that long run. And also for Shen with Layla, she'd been a top runner around the state. She wins the state Class A title. And for Rob Cloutier, who I believe started the same year I did covering cross country, winning that first state championship for Shen was a real big moment for him.
It was. I mean, you talk about Eric Hayden. I covered him when he played, and they beat Boston Spa his senior year when they won the championship in 2009. And he was a passionate player. He's a passionate coach. I think he felt like this team had potential, but I think that was the game where he kind of realized, hey, we got a legitimate shot. If everything breaks right, we've got some really good players here. We could really challenge for the championship. And, they were not the number 1 seed, obviously. So for them to be able to do it and then get to the state final was a big breakthrough for their program, but also for him as a coach.
Yeah. And how about CBA basketball? I mean, 25-0, run the table. I saw them against Shen early in the year, their 9th win of the year. They had to rally in the fourth quarter to do it. How good was that team on the court for the brothers versus other teams you've seen over the years?
Well, look, the biggest thing for them, Sean, was that Jalal Cancer in his second year. Now, he won a state championship as a junior point guard for them, a decade and a half ago. But his biggest thing was to get them to buy into the defensive side of things. Last year, they had moments. They were in games. They were in close games, but their defensive acumen wasn't consistent. They would have moments where they would play defense, and they'd have other moments where they would just let teams run out on them. And this year, after they played they won a few games out of section downstate, and really after that, when they came back, their defensive acumen was just exceptional. I think that's the reason why they won the game. Look, JJ Ozinski had a great season. He was our player of the year. They have other players. 3/5 of their starting lineup last year was the secondary for the football team. So you got JT Vogel, who was our defensive player of the year. You had Bob Koffel, who's an outstanding receiver, DB, and also kick returner for them. And then Jack Hewlett, who's a sophomore this year. Those guys were 3/5 of the starting lineup. They brought that defensive mentality to the court. JJ Ozinski, and I've told him this before, like last year, I didn't like his consistently. I didn't think his defense was at a consistent level. He raised his level exponentially, and that team just took off. When you look at what they were able to do in the second half of the year, and they started blowing teams out from our area. And then obviously they had to get over a big hurdle in the Section 2 finals. Shaker was the defending state champion. They had some injury problems throughout the year where they lost Melvin Brown. He was hurt from the football season. Didn't start the year. Marcel and McKenney was out for a while. They never really got going to the level that they were the year before, and CBA was able to take advantage of that. And then when they got to the state tournament, two just absolutely dominating all-around performances where they beat two really quality teams in Mamaroneck and Fairport to win that state championship. And you look at that season, it was all, I think, really started and finished with their defensive, mentality and how hard they played and how consistently hard they played. Because some teams can bring it for 15, 20 minutes, maybe even 25 minutes. To bring it for 32 minutes consistently, it says a lot about what Jalal Cancer did as a coach.
Okay, before we get to the spring, you talk about Shaker CBA. That's 2 straight years. Section 2 has won the state title. If you look on the girls' side, Shaker had Albertus Magnus where they wanted him in the fourth quarter, the state semifinal, which I had been told, I covered that game. I've been told going in that was probably going to be really the state championship game. They lose in overtime. Section 2 seems like it in many sports to have really, really, I don't want to say caught up to the rest of the state, but having great performances in state championships in recent years.
No doubt. Sean, when we think about this, I would have people sometimes who complain to me because the boys basketball championships were in Glens Falls. And I was like, geez, do you realize that we have there were certain times where we would win like 1 or 2 championships in a 10-year span. And now the last 3 years. Now, this year we had CBA win it. Last year we had Shaker win it, but we also had Burnock's Westerlo win a state championship, and then Glens Falls. Two years ago, in 2024, we had 4 boys basketball state championship teams. So that's 8 championships in 3 years. Then you talk about baseball. We just had the baseball season end. We had we had Spa Catholic win a second straight Class C championship. We had Duanesburg, who had never won a state championship, never played in the state final, never played in the state Final Four, gets there and wins it. And then Averill Park, who started the year getting beat by Saratoga Springs 32-2, and then Shen 7-1 to open their Suburban Council season, winds up finishing 3rd as the smallest school in the class. Sean, in the last 10 years, we've had 6 different Suburban Council teams win state championships in baseball, 6 straight years. Now, there was no tournaments in 20 and 21 because of COVID. Boston Spa started off in 19. Then we had Averill Park win it in 22. Columbia won it in 23. Bethlehem won it in 24. And then last year, Saratoga Springs won the AAA title. And then this year, Averill Park won their second Class A title in 4 years for George Brooks. We're having a lot of success in a lot of different sports. Football, it's we've had teams get to the final. We haven't had as many champions. They've been smaller school champions in recent years with Glens Falls, Schuylerville, Cambridge, Salem, and Cambridge by themselves. We haven't had as many large school champions, but overall, when you think about the scope of the state and Section 2 athletics, Section 2 doesn't really have to take a backseat to pretty much anybody. They're doing outstanding things in a lot of different sports. You think about skiing. We've had all alpine skiing champions on both the boys and girls side. Cross country's obviously been a staple for our section for many, many years with Saratoga Springs and other teams have risen up. And obviously on the boys side, we just mentioned Burnt Hills. But you look at all the different sports, we've had a lot of different teams do really well, but also a lot of individuals that have really stood out as well.
Yeah. How challenging is that for you to be filling out your mileage reimbursement when it comes time for payroll? You're all over the place. You're one of the busiest guys I know.
It's busy, but I mean it's a good busy, Sean. I mean, look, I mean, there's a lot of good things. There's a lot of good things to talk about with our section, and one of the things that I was really happy about when I arrived from another paper in our area in 2006 was the editor at the time, Bill Callen. He asked me, what would you like to change? And I said, well, I think one thing you have to have large school and small school all area teams for the bigger sports, because there's going to be times where a Class C athlete occasionally or a Class D athlete might break through and make a basketball first team all area if you're talking about the entire section. But there's going to be a lot of times where there are only a couple of Class C or Class D Division I players throughout the entire state for basketball. So to try to put them up against AAA and AA kids, I thought was unfair. And I thought you're not serving your readers because there's so many small schools compared to large schools. And I think that's a help, because you look at, there's so many good stories in small school athletics. I mean, one of them just happened on the softball side. Chatham won the second straight Class B state championship, which is really, impressive. Their pitcher, Skylar Groom, is only a junior. She's already committed to Binghamton. She committed last year. She had an 18-1 record. She threw 3 no-hitters in succession, quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals of the Section 2 tournament. She had 5 overall, and she only was the leadoff hitter and had 10 home runs and hit .614. So, and JB Brantley is a great coach. He's won 3 state championships. He's also done other sports. And you might know that name. He's involved. He's relatives with Mickey Brantley and obviously Michael was the outstanding outfielder for Cleveland and Houston. So we just have so many good stories. The cross country elements, the basketball, some of the smaller sports. We just had a girl from Shen win the state tennis championship. It was the first time we've had an individual state champion in tennis in 27 years. So there's a lot of good stories around Section 2, large school and small school.
Yeah, you bring up cross country. It's my favorite day of the year is Section 2 championship day. You're going to get 8 good races. You're going to have elite athletes all over the place. And the one thing you talk about the small schools, like in the years that I've done the All-Stars with Section 2 cross country, like you have to be cognizant of times. If somebody's in a Class C race and they're way out ahead of somebody, they're not going to get pushed. Their time is just probably not going to be as good as some of the kids in the Class A or even Class B race. So when you're going through All-Stars, you don't want to penalize them, because how do you grade it, right? If you look at a like time on a similar course on the same course on the same day, it doesn't always tell the story. So I do agree with you on. You want to acknowledge the smaller schools.
It's one of those things where I had mentioned this a few years before, and we finally did it this year, was, girls volleyball. We had a small school team for the first time, because I felt like it wasn't unfair, but, really when you look at it, Shen and Burnt Hills had, almost the entire first team and a lot of the second team, because, they're winning state championships, or they're in the Final Four every year. So, and there are not a lot of Division I kids and Division II kids out of those, schools. So, but, Galway's had a really good program for a long time. There's a lot of good small school programs, and Galway's had Kira Allen, who's only a sophomore. She's going to make all area team for softball and for volleyball. And she's also a good basketball player. She averaged 20 points a game. She's only a sophomore. She's been a top volleyball player for the last 3 years, and she's still got 2 years to go. And So yeah, I mean that's another sport where maybe it's not the worst thing if we had a small school and a large school cross country team.
Yeah. We talked about before the ascension of Section 2. With that comes notoriety, a lot more eyeballs on you. And I think the result of that is you have some of your better student athletes moving on to prep schools. Do you want to throw a few out there that we know are leaving for at the end of this year and for next season? And
yeah, Sean, we were inundated last year with a lot of that. We had a lot of different kids that left. Stetson Merritt from Troy was a great player. Had been on the varsity, for a long time, and it still has a couple of years to go. Two great players from LaSalle, Devon Maloney and Treddy Faison went, and they played in the prep leagues. This year so far, we've had two very prominent boys basketball players leave, and that's J.J. Ozinski, we just mentioned, of a CBA. He's going to Albany Academy, and they play in the New England Prep League. This is their second year they're going to be in the New England Prep League, and people are like, well, why would a guy who's the all-time leading scorer just won a state championship want to go? Well, let's look at it. He's 6'5". He's sort of a tweener size for the Division I level. What is he going to be, a small forward? Is he going to, he doesn't really rate as a guard. So he felt like, I've done everything I can do at this level, and not that there isn't good competition in Section 2, but New England Prep League, you're playing scholarship level players every time you take the court. And some of these teams, they have multitude of Division I players. Maloney went to Newman School in Boston. They had a McDonald's All-American. Their three top players are going to Michigan. They have like multiple high level guys. Illinois, Michigan. They had a guy that's going to Illinois, who's the McDonald's All-American. Another guy's going to Michigan. Maybe he may not go there now because their coach just left. But they have all five guys that they had that were seniors. The top five seniors last year all went to a high major, and then another guy went to join Fran McCaffrey at Penn. So there's a lot of good players in that league, and he looked at it and said, I've done everything I can do at CBA. Even if I win another state championship, it's not going to be as good it's not going to be any better than what I've already accomplished. Yeah. And these guys are looking to get recruited, and the college landscape with the transfer portal, with guys coming in back from the G League, they're allowed to play in college basketball again. High school, even the most prominent high schools, seniors, unless you're like the upper echelon, like the guys that are getting paid money, they're getting NIL deals before they even go to college. It's a lot harder to get recruited, and you if you're a college coach, you got an opportunity to get a senior who just played maybe 3 or 4 years in another school, and now you're going to get him. Do you want it or do you want to have to take an 18-year-old that is not going to be ready to handle the highest level of college basketball? So a lot of our top players the last few years have decided to go the prep route. Some of them, in the case of Daniel Smalls, who left after Niskayuna last year when they got to the state final in AA, he was a very young senior. He would have graduated high school at 17 years old, and he's a 6-foot point guard. He wasn't getting a lot of looks. In New England Prep, some of these summer showcases that they've already done, Marcel McKenney's going to Cats Academy. He got 4 offers basically the moment he decided to go to Cats Academy. That they hadn't, because his coaches hadn't even seen him play because he was hurt at that time. They knew of him, they'd seen tape of him. But it's one of those things where I don't think a lot of people around here understand the scope of what some of these prep schools can provide in terms of recruiting. It's not so much that coaches here aren't good or schools here aren't good, or the competition on the whole is very strong in Section 2. And a lot of these teams, Shaker went outside the section this past year to play some really good teams. They did it the year they won the state championship. Green Tech did it 2 years ago. They played a lot of really strong programs. CBA did the same thing when they only had so many opportunities to play outside their league, but they did it. But the thing is, Albany Academy, and they had a really good team 2 years ago. They were barely over 500 as a New England prep school team, and there was 8 teams in their AA playoffs. They were the 8th seed, and they got dusted by a team that wanted to win in the tournament. And they had a guy that played in the Capital Classic that was one of the top high school players in the country in Jack Loretis. So it's a different level, and I think it's going to be something that I think over the next few years is going to be something that I think a lot of people in Section 2 are going to have to take note of, because we're going to see more top players, boys and girls, decide to go there.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on that because the price of success. I'm torn on that because I feel bad for the schools that work with these kids, bring them along, the coaches. I put myself in the position of a coach like Jamie Shipley at Shaker Girls, returning 4 starters from that state semifinalist. Peyton Hoblock's off to Dartmouth, and then the Lonnie twins are now moving on to play at the Huzak school.
Right.
You got to be happy for the kids, right? Is that the end? You want to make them better and prepare them for the next level? It's got to be a fine line there.
It is. I mean, look, I talked to Sophie Lanny, and she was torn. I mean, she obviously, Julie McBride's the coach, and if anybody doesn't know who Julie McBride is, she played at Catholic High. She started her career at Mechanicville. She played at Catholic High. She went to Syracuse, broke all the scoring records there. Great point guard. Played 15 years as a pro. They just won the Huzak school just won the AAA girls New England championship. So. They knew her from the Albany Capitals. That they play for the Havoc, but they knew her, and it's a situation. It's the same thing. It's not that they don't want to. They still play AAU with Jayla Jeter and with Jackson, Malia Jackson. So it's not like there's a strained relationship. It's just one of those situations where they felt like both the sisters felt like. We're going to get pushed. Every game we play in this league, we're playing against a scholarship player that even at Shaker, even when you're playing AAA and AA teams, you're not getting that you're not playing scholarship level players every game. And it's a unique situation for them because unlike a lot of these other kids that had to leave, I mean, McKinney's in Boston, so he's away. A lot of these other kids, I talked to, Faison and Maloney and Stetson, and they said Stetson Merritt, and they said, they had growing, they had a hard time making the adjustment initially because they were homesick, being away and having to be on your own. It's almost like a college level, proficiency in terms of how you go about your daily business because you're living, you're living away from your house, you're living away from your family. But in the case of Huzak, it's in Huzak Falls, so they can drive and still live in Latham and drive back and forth. It's not a small decision to make, but I think in a lot of these kids' cases, I can't really fault them because, again, the Division I landscape in terms of recruiting. I mean, two of these boys division or these summer showcases they had, there was 300 Division I coaches there.
Yeah.
Where are you going to get that? And I mean, obviously, high school kids don't get recruited from Division I coaches like they did back in the day when Sam Perkins was playing and Dean Smith sitting in the stands. Sure. Because there's AAU, they can see these kids in the summer circuit, but you're never going to get that much exposure. Even if you're playing for the Albany City Rocks, you're not going to have that many Division I eyes on you. And the girls have some of those showcases too. So I'm sure they've already been seen. They're already getting Division I offers, but their offer sheet's going to go way up just playing in that league.
Yeah. Well, you know what? You can't fault them. If that's something they want to do and go to the next level, I'm sure most, if not all these kids, it's a hard decision to make. Do I leave my teammates? They're still friends. They're still going to be friends. And you talk about the Lonnie staying home. They're still going to be around people if time allows, but they have to prepare themselves if college athletics wants to be their thing. And the best way to do it is to play against the best competition.
And it's hard. It's hard for them. And look, I've talked to all these kids the last 3 or 4 years that have done this, and all of them. It wasn't an easy decision for them to make. I mean, you're moving. We had it with football. Keegan Croucher after his freshman year at Fultonville, and he left. And people are like, "Why would he leave?" Like, well, he's good. He went to Cheshire. Now he's in another school in Tennessee. He's going to Ole Miss. He's one of the top 10 quarterbacks in his class, and some people think he's top 5 quarterback in his class. Yeah. And if things keep going for the way for him, he did that. He was 14 years old, and he decided to go to a school in Connecticut and be by himself. So. It takes a lot of things. I mean, people just kind of brush it off and say, "Oh, they're just chasing this, they're chasing that." I'm like, well, I mean, look, it's your future. I mean, yeah, you want to have loyalty to your school, and I'm sure that the Lonnies didn't look at this and say, we're not being, we don't want to be disloyal to Shaker, but we have to be loyal to ourselves. And if they think that's the best opportunity for them to land. Not only Division I scholarship that they desire, but make them better players by the time they get to, college. then I can't fault them for that, because it's that New England Prep League is, I don't think people understand. I watched Albany Academy play Cheshire, which we just mentioned about football, which Keegan Croucher, but they didn't have a Division I player that was on their upperclassmen. They have a couple kids that are freshmen that played for them that are going to be eventually Division I players, but of their upperclassmen last year, they didn't have a Division I player. Barely had a Division II player. They basically almost had a scholarship-less upper class, which is the only team in New England that I know of that had that. And they beat the crap out of Albany Academy in the second half. They backdoored them. Jim Driggs, the coach there, his college roommate was the college teammate was the coach at Cheshire. They ran backdoor stuff. Pete Carrill would be like, "Wow, that was really good." And they did it over and over again against scholarship level players, and they didn't have a Division I kid. And they, were a team that was ranked in the top 50 in the country and didn't have a Division I player, didn't have a Division II player among their top 7 or 8 upperclassmen, which is really, really impressive. And that just gives you a real small blueprint of what that New England League is. I mean, some of those teams, a couple of them play in the Super League, and Cats Academy is one of them that Marcel McKenney's going. They're playing IMG Academy. They're playing, some of these teams are like they're like nationally ranked in the top 20. There's like 6 teams in that league that are ranked in the top 15 last year. 2 of them played in the national championship tournament. One of them got to the finals. So it's a level of competition that Marcel McKenney, he goes, I just couldn't pass it up. I said, he's transitioning. He was a small forward, a shaker. He's going to be a shooting guard in college. He's making that transition now. And he said, I talked to him, and he hadn't even, he was hurt. He couldn't even play. They had a gym rat challenge event here in Albany. He couldn't play. He's back playing now, but at the time when he made the decision, he wasn't able to play. And he just said, my college interest has blown up in the last 10 days more than I ever got, at Shaker. And it's no detriment to Shaker or any other high school team in Section 2. It's just the landscape of college athletics and the recruiting battles that you have to deal with, and these kids are fighting an uphill battle because the transfer portal's made a lot of these freshman spots much more difficult to attain.
Yeah. Hey, I also want to pivot to the recent Section 1 vote on the public versus private schools. You want to explain that to the viewers, and also what ramifications that may have in Section 2, if any?
Yeah, I think people that know our Section 2 history back in the 70s. When a lot of the private schools, they played in the Diocesan League, which was separate from the Suburban Council. A lot of the CBA, Amsterdam for a while, Troy, Schenectady, when the Big Ten broke up, they were assimilated into the Suburban Council. But for many, many years, when the start of the advent of, say, just for instance, the Section 2 football tournament began in 1978, a lot of the private schools at that point, the Diocesan League had broken up. So CBA and some of these other teams were, playing in those, they were allowed to play in the, they played the Section 2 season, and then they're part of the New York State Public High School Athletic Association. From Section 2's perspective, has 10% private schools, which would, Albany Academy has been. They've sort of broken off into the prep league now the last couple of years, but their basketball team had played separately. But there are a lot of other teams, like their baseball team and some of their other sports, swimming, had played in Section 2 for years. And what's happened, and there's been a lot of uproar. And I'll make this example because I think it's more apropos what we talked about in the beginning of the podcast, talking about CBA football.
Yeah.
CBA football for 4 decades had 2 sectional titles. They won one in the mid '80s with Cliff Lehman, and then they won one in 2013 when Joe Burke was the coach. They beat Shaker 13-8 at UAlbany. But prior to Bobby Burns coming over from Troy, the year before they went 2-5 the full season, or they went 3-6 the last full season, and then the COVID season they went 2-4, and they lost their last 4 in the spring, the year that Bobby Burns took over. So 3 months later, he took basically the same players, and he won the Section 2 title and the AA title as a 3 seed. He beat the 2 teams that he had lost to during the regular season. And I started getting emails saying, you got to get CBA out of here. This is terrible. And I'm going, well, wait a second. They've been here for 45, 50 years. And what happens is nobody raises a stink about private schools when they don't win, but when they win, and of course CBA won 4 straight AA titles.
Sure.
Now it's a bad problem. Well, it's not just around in Section 2. There's been a lot of other areas, and Section 1 has been one and it's interesting, Sean, because there's not that many Section 1 private schools. They only had a few, and you talked about the basketball team, and they were one of them, the girls basketball team there that won the state championship, but
Yeah.
there aren't that many, and they haven't had that much success. Section 1 has had a lot of success with their public schools. So it's an interesting tack that they've taken. So basically what they've done, the state had an opportunity, there's 11 different sections in the state, and that's not counting the PSAL and the Catholic school leagues and the different entities and the AIS, which is what Albany Academy was, independent schools.
Okay.
That used to be part of what the federation was. The federation tournament for basketball has been done away with, but a lot of these other sections allow private schools to play in the public school, leagues. And then when they get to the postseason, they play in the tournaments. And we've had some successes, not just in Section 2 in recent years, but other sections have had some of their private schools. I think one at Section 5 has been, bellowing about this for a long time, because they've had teams like McQuaid and different teams win state, football championships or basketball or whatever it is. And the public schools just hate it. And it's an interesting dynamic, because I think there's a lot of different layers to this. People are like, well, the private schools, they should all be playing each other. Yeah, okay. So you're going to have CBA play Loudonville Christian, who's got 60 kids. You can't. And I've heard people like, when CBA basketball got really good with Dave Domel, his first 3 years, he was 3-18, 3-18, 3-19. Everybody wanted to play them in the Christmas tournament. Every coach in the section wanted to play them. And then when they got good, now it's not a good thing. But I had people telling me, oh, they have to go to the play. They got to play outside the section. I said, so you're going to have them drive to New York City on a Tuesday with their JV and their varsity basketball team. They're going to have to leave at noon. They're going to get home at 2 a.m. In the snow. I mean, you got to be realistic about what you're asking for. What the state has allowed, they've allowed these private schools to play. And in the case of the Section 2, when I started this was in 89, but I mean, even in the 70s and 80s, Catholic High had 1,200 kids when I started as a reporter. They had 22 this year. I mean, they joined with Bishop Gibbons. They had no basketball team. They won the state championship in girls basketball a couple years ago. No team. They had no boys team. They had girls team. Their top players left. It wasn't a good situation. What Section 1 wants to do is they want to have separate tournaments. There's been legislation that's been tried to, the politicians have even tried to get involved with this. Until we come up with a system, the state basically had all the sections to vote on it, and it got voted down. Section 1 is trying to implement it, and they're trying to force the issue not only for their own section to get these private schools to play a separate tournament with. In some of these sports, I don't know what they're going to do. They're going to only have a couple of teams. A place will play one game, and then they have no alternative. They have no opportunity to play in the states. So that's an interesting dynamic in itself. But if Section 2 is successful with this, it could force the state as a whole to look at this issue a little bit deeper, and maybe we could have, down the road, we could have separate tournaments.
Yeah, you brought up Bobby Burns, and I just chuckled because he had Troy as a powerhouse, and he turned CBA around like that. Can you put in all the time you've covered Section 2, who are some of the top coaches and players you've covered? I know recent years, Burns, we just mentioned, going way back, Brent Sturwald was always seemed like the staple for coaching in Section 2 football. But is there any that really stand out to you in all these years?
Well, before I talk about the coaches and players, I'll tell you my first road trip out of section was 89-90 season. Troy girls had just come off winning the state championship, and then Shen won the state championship that year. They had two twin sisters, Debbie and Laura Barnes. They both went to Richmond. Both of them were state players of the year. One was the Gatorade player of the year. One was the New York State player of the year, different seasons. And they were a top 10 ranked team. So my first road trip was to go to the Christ the King tournament. All 8 teams, Sean, were ranked in the top 18 in the USA Today poll back when the USA Today was doing high school polls.
Yeah.
Christ the King was ranked number 1. They had 11 scholarship players. Their top player went to Georgia. She was the high school player of the year, Nakia Hill. Troy wound up playing Shen in the quarterfinals, a blind draw, so they had to play each other. They wound up playing each other in the state final at Glens Falls. The only time they ever moved the girls' final to Glens Falls Civic Center. They had standing room only crowd. Shen wound up winning the title that year. Shen was up by 13 in the fourth quarter against Christ King in the final, wind up losing in overtime. Then they lost to him in the Federation Championship after winning the state title. So that was my first road trip. So I got indoctrinated really well right out there. So you talked about Ken Strube, who's a perfect example. There's a great coach at Shen that won 4 state championships. How can you not talk about Gary Bynum and what he's done about, Burn Hill's 22, what I think is 22 straight Final Fours in volleyball, state Final Fours, multiple state championships, three Gatorade Players of the Year. Most recent was Carly Reslotarski. He's playing at Colgate. We've had great football coaches. You think about, we talked about cross country, so many, Saratoga with obviously the great run that they've had.
Yeah.
The run of success, and now you've had other individuals and some great teams in recent years that have broken through outside of Saratoga Springs. But coaches, here's a good example. George Brooks just won his 4th state championship as a 41-year-old baseball coach at Averill Park. He won 2 at Averill Park. He won 2 with John Rooney, who's in AAA. Got a little brief call up last year with the Astros, with Hoosick Valley back a decade ago. And he's got 4 state championships already. Sean Oregon, look at what he's done at Averill Park girls basketball. Sure. He's won 15 titles since 06. I mean, it's ridiculous. We were really spoiled. Great athletes. I mean, obviously, Kevin Hurd or Jim Fredette, Joseph Girard, multiple sports quarterback, state champion, basketball state championship. That I'll never forget. Jim Boeheim and Jerry McNamara going bananas when he hit the game-winning shot to win the state championship at 19 at Binghamton.
Sure.
We've been really blessed. I mean, think about Andre Jackson, who's coming back doing a camp this weekend at Amsterdam, who's an Albany Academy grad, obviously playing the NBA with the Bucks. We've had some really good stories. I mean, how can I not talk about Claire Hutton and what she's done? I covered her as a 7th grader in her first interview when she was 12 years old.
Nice.
I have interviewed professional athletes that weren't as good at interview as her as a 12-year-old, and she's obviously taken off and on the world, going to be on the world stage here coming up soon with the American soccer team.
How fun is it to watch? I mean, you said John Rooney's name to me, and my immediately thought was basketball because I had him. I think
he was a good basketball player too. Yeah.
Great basketball player.
Yep.
You see these kids in different scopes, different uniforms, different seasons. How rewarding is it to cover them, their careers, and kind of watch them go off? And you say, Claire Hutton, she's going to be a fixture in U.S.
It's great, especially when it makes it. Look, anything in life, there's always going to be people that are really great people. There's going to be some that are okay. I mean, look, you're covering 37 years. You're going to have some kids that may not be the greatest personalities or maybe have some growing up to do, but I mean I just think about how all these kids, I mean I've been doing this long enough, Sean, where I'm covering now grandkids of people I covered when I started. I think back to Andre Cook, who's now Division II coach, having a great run at St. Edwards down in Texas, and
sure.
I covered him is end of his career in Water of Elite, and never forget that 3 state championships, boys championships, the large sports in the same year. 2 of them undefeated, football and basketball. And then the baseball team lost 5 games because they played in a league where they had 2 or 3 classifications bigger than them, and then won the state championship in the same year, which I don't know if it'll ever be duplicated.
My Times Union 1.0 era, one of the first, I can tell you, the first championship game I ever covered, I was a part-timer, a clerk in the department, and they sent me up to Glens Falls to cover that Water Elite team when they took Rensselaer, the defending Section 2 champs, apart in the championship game.
Yeah.
That at the moment, being in the Glens Falls Civic Center, I was fresh out of college. It's like, this is awesome. I'm getting paid to do this?
I think back, Sean, I'll make you laugh. 4 years in a row in Civic Center, Class D, 4 teams had losing records. Some of them were had only 3 or 4 regular season wins in their league. Got to the sectional final in 4 straight years. 4 different schools: Hoosick Valley, Stillwater, Voorheesville. They all had losing records because they played against teams bigger than them, and then they got to the final. None of them won, but it was really cool to see. A team. In the case of Stillwater, their best player was hurt half the year, so it skewed some of their their one-loss record, but. You talked about kids, and I think of a perfect example, a kid who plays multiple sports. Maybe people don't know that she plays this other sport, is Katie Duffy, who's going to North Carolina, great lacrosse player from Queensbury. Her sister obviously is having a great career winding down at Army, where she played both soccer and lacrosse and was all league player and lacrosse player, all American player, and a top player in the country. Katie played on the Adirondack United hockey team that got to the state final. So there's not as many girls hockey teams, obviously, as there are boys. So a lot of people don't know that she could play this other sport. But, she missed 7 games this year with injury, comes back, beats the defending champion Columbia, scores 3 goals, has 7 assists, and wins 18 draws coming off the injured list, and then beats Bethlehem, the team they lost to early in the season, in the final. They won 8 straight sectional titles, and she's part of 4 of them.
Yeah, I actually covered that game, and I went up and afterwards, and I said, what were the draw totals? And they said, I think she won 16 out of 18. I'm like, can you check that? Because I don't remember her losing any draws. They had the ball the entire game.
Yeah, she's just a dominant player. And the thing is, look, they lost their first league game when she was out this year. They had won in the league. They had a 130 game winning streak in the Foothills Council. And Dave Hughes, their coach, she scored 40 goals this year in 12 games. She could have scored 100 goals. If they let her on the field, she could have, even in that short amount of playing time, she could have just gone off. They just don't run up scores. They use, kids that are barely play in these games. But she's one of the most dominant, lacrosse players that I've seen in our area in 25 years.
That's great. James, look, I really appreciate you jumping in. Look, with this, hopefully you can turn in a couple vacation slips and go catch your breath.
Yeah, well, we still got a few things to do, but we're gonna basically the first 3 weeks of July we're gonna disappear.
Awesome. Well, good for you. Go take a break. And I hope to have you back on here real soon.
Sounds good.
All right, my man. Be good.
You got it. Take care.
Enjoy your summer.